So, you want to bulk up, but you consider yourself a hard gainer, or you believe your body wasn't made to put on weight. Listen, I know how it feels like. I've been through the trials and tribulations to put on weight myself, and unlike many of the influencers you will see, I actually struggled to get there. Now, I'm not asking for your pity, I'm just here to tell you that I understand what it's like, and just like you, I didn't think I could do it, but I still managed to somewhat do it. So, you're currently having a hard time putting on weight, so in this video I'll teach you my complete understanding on how to put on weight and bulk up and how I use those same tactics myself. My focus will specifically be on the food aspect because I understand that it is the most important aspect of all. The first step we have to understand is in order for us to gain weight, we have a hierarchy of importance about the things we should focus on. There's 5 main things covered in this hierarchy. At the very bottom we have energy balance. That's the amount of energy you consume through food on a daily basis. Right above that we have macronutrient intake. Those include protein, fats and carbs and still matter but slightly less than calories. Right above macronutrients we have micronutrients. Again, slightly less important than macronutrients. And then finally we have meal timing and supplements that are the 2 least important things to focus on when it comes to putting on weight. What I want to cover in this video are the 2 most important factors when it comes to weight gain, which are calories and macronutrients. At the very basis, in order for us to gain weight or lose weight, we need to put ourselves in a caloric surplus or caloric deficit. If we are trying to gain weight, we need to be in a caloric surplus, meaning we just eat more calories than we burn. And if we're trying to lose weight, we have to be in a caloric deficit, meaning you just eat less calories than you burn. Now, I know that other things matter as well, but when you're quite skinny and already have a hard time to put on weight, you should really focus on getting the calories in because that is what matters the most. Of course, try to eat healthier foods and get enough micronutrients in. Just make sure you get the necessary amount of calories in. All you really need to understand is for you to gain weight, no matter how fast you consider your metabolism to be, is not to necessarily eat more food but consume more calories. And I'll explain a bunch of easy methods you can use to do exactly that later in the video. Now that we understand that we should be in a caloric surplus in order for us to gain weight, we need to understand how big that surplus should be. There's only 2 ways you can bulk up. You can do a clean bulk and you can do a dirty bulk. A clean bulk is simply when you put yourself in a slight caloric surplus and steadily increase your calories over time. This is a much more calculated way to bulk up. A dirty bulk, on the other hand, is when you simply eat as much food as humanly possible on a daily basis to put on as much size as quickly as possible. Often there is a lot of junk food included because they make it much easier to get a lot of calories in. In general, for most people, clean bulking is the right approach because it allows you to maximize muscle gain whilst minimizing fat gain. What many people will start to experience as they up their calories too much and get in that dirty bulk category is that they'll have unnecessary fat gain, which most people don't want. Now, dirty bulking being the wrong approach for most people and in most scenarios can still be very useful and good for a specific type of person. The types of people who can benefit from this type of extreme caloric surplus are the people who are underfed and underweight and the people who have a terrible appetite. First of all, underfed and underweight people. The 2 people that first come into my mind are David Lade and Joe Fazer, being really good examples of this. Both were very skinny and underweight in the beginning and are 2 great examples of people who would benefit a lot from a dirty bulk. The reason dirty bulking can be effective in that kind of scenario is because your body will absorb every single calorie it gets to put on lean mass. A second type of person I think a dirty bulk can be very useful for are the people who have a terrible appetite. And the reason I think it can be very useful for this type of person is because a dirty bulk for a person like this might be the equivalent of a clean bulk for someone else. Remember, a dirty bulk was eating as much food as humanly possible to put on as much weight as possible in the least amount of time. When someone with a terrible appetite eats as much as possible, it might end up not being that much food. I had a friend one day who told me he was eating tons of food and then went on to tell me what he was eating, and I was like, bro, that's maybe like 2000 calories. He wasn't bulking, but he had this idea in mind that he was eating so much food. So if you're part of those 2 categories of people, I would highly suggest you go down the dirty bulk path at least once. If you don't belong to either of these categories, you'll most likely be better off doing a clean bulk. If you're unsure about the answer, try one dirty bulk to see how it affects you and determine based on the results you got which category you belong to. If you gained tons of fat whilst putting on muscle, you most likely didn't need to dirty bulk. However, if you felt like you put on tons of muscle and it felt like your body was absorbing all the calories to build muscle, you most likely needed that dirty bulk. Remember that even if you got really fat during a bulk, you can always recover from it and you'll know that you don't need to bulk as hard anymore. So, in this section, I want to answer a couple of questions. First of all, how quickly should you bulk if you're clean bulking? I mentioned right before that clean bulking was the right answer for most people. So for this type of bulk, keep on average a weight gain of 0.25% to 0.5% of your body weight per week. If you are 150 pounds, your weight gain should be approximately 0.4 to 0.8 pounds per week. This way we can maximize muscle growth whilst also minimizing fat gain. If we go above 0.5% of our body weight per week, we're gonna gain an unnecessary amount of fat. And if we go below 0.25%, it's gonna be very difficult to track and you won't be building as much muscle as you could. This is why we want to keep it between that range. To gain that amount of weight per week, you'll have to stay between a 200 to 500 caloric surplus every week. So just a slightly bigger portion each day and extra food in between meals. Now that 500 calorie surplus you were in the first week won't be a 500 calorie surplus in the second week because your body is adapting the amount of calories it's burning on a daily basis. As your body weight increases, your REE or resting energy expenditure starts to increase as well. Your DEF or thermic effect of food will also increase as you're consuming more calories. This in turn will cause you to gain less and less weight over the weeks and you'll have to make some adjustments. If you start to realize that your weight is stagnating and you start to fall below that 0.25%, increase your daily calories by about 100 to 200 calories so you keep making steady progress over the weeks and months. However, if you find yourself gaining weight too quickly, no matter how hard it feels to do it, lower your calories by 100 to 200 calories so you don't gain weight too fast. The second question I want to answer is how long should a bulking phase last? Whether you're doing a dirty bulk or a clean bulk, I wouldn't go above 3 to 4 months at a time. Generally, if your main goal is putting on mass, keeping a ratio of 3 to 4 months of bulking with 1 month of cutting will be really good. Now that we've covered how fast you should actually bulk, how can you go about increasing your calories and appetite effortlessly? One of the most common struggles that skinny people face is their inability to eat lots of food. Generally, they struggle to get calories in and don't have enough of an appetite to eat the necessary amount of food to grow. Fortunately, there are some very easy methods to increase both variables, the amount of calories you get in and how hungry you feel. The first idea is to prioritize high calorie dense foods. These are foods that have a high amount of calories in them with a low volume. When we think about typical high calorie dense foods, generally it is things like peanut butter, cooking oils, butter, nuts, snacks, and so on. If you prioritize these kinds of foods, you'll have a much easier time getting the necessary amount of calories you need on a daily basis. The second idea, which kind of follows the first one, is that you shouldn't fully neglect junk foods. We know that junk foods are bad for your health, but they make it a lot easier to hit your daily calories. The key here is to only take them as a way to hit your daily calories, not make them a normal thing in your diet. For most of the day, I would try to maximize the amount of healthy and high calorie foods I take in, and if I wasn't able to hit my daily amount, I would use those kinds of foods at the end of the day to still hit my targets for the day in a much easier way. The third idea is to focus on liquid calories. These are a complete game changer. The main thing with liquid calories is that drinking 1000 calories is a lot easier than eating 1000 calories because it takes a lot less space in your stomach. If you search online, you'll have tons of people who have already made videos about high calorie shakes they've made. You can look at those for ideas. Otherwise, you also have sodas and other things like this. Again, these things are not healthy, but they can serve as a way to bump up the calories you consume on a daily basis. A fourth idea is to prioritize fats over other macros. In 1 gram of fat, you have 9 calories, compared to protein which has 4 calories per gram and carbs which also has 4 calories per gram. That means you'll get more than double the calories if you eat 100 grams of fat compared to 100 grams of protein or carbs. Fats also have the lowest thermic effect. What I mean by that is that in order for your body to digest food, it needs energy. Our body burns calories when it is digesting food, but the amount of calories it burns depends on the macros. With protein, it burns the most amount of calories, with carbs less, and with fats, it barely burns any calories. Not only do fats have the highest amount of calories per gram, but they also burn the least during digestion. Generally, you'll see that junk foods, high calorie dense foods, and so on also tend to be high in fat, so I'm kind of repeating myself here. The last idea is to eat at all times of the day. Don't try to practice something like intermittent fasting or any other restricted eating window. When you're bulking, you just want to get the calories in, so I find that eating at all times of the day helps you get more calories in throughout the day because you have time to digest and be hungry again. Those include all the ways you can increase the amount of calories you consume on a daily basis in a quite easy way. Now, we also have ways to increase our appetite throughout the day. The first way is to consume less protein. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but let me explain. There's 2 reasons why eating less protein is ideal when you're trying to bulk up. First of all, you need to understand that during a bulk, you're consuming plenty of calories. When you are bulking, your body is well fed and is much less likely to break down muscle tissue as a fuel source. You have many carbs and fats as a source of energy to burn first. They have this protein sparing effect. So during a bulking phase, you generally need less protein, which is why it's not that big of a deal to eat less protein. Now, the first reason to eat less protein is because of an idea called the protein leverage hypothesis, which says that because our body knows that it requires a lot of protein, it will push you to keep eating to get more protein. Even if you ate the same amount of calories, you will be hungrier if you eat a low protein diet than if you would be if you ate a high protein diet. Out of all the macronutrients, protein is the most filling of all. If we keep in mind that we need less protein on a bulk, trying to just get the minimum amount of protein we need on a daily basis is ideal because we'll have more hunger with less protein. The second reason is because protein has the highest thermic effect. I mentioned before that fats had the lowest thermic effect, which means they require the least amount of energy to be digested. Protein is the exact opposite. It has the highest thermic effect and thus requires the most amount of energy to be digested by the body. Now, obviously the difference in calories burnt isn't much, but it can always help. A second way to increase appetite is to reduce fiber intake. Fiber will, just like food volume, make you more satiated. In order to increase your appetite, you can always try to reduce the amount of fiber you take in. Those often come from foods like fruits, vegetables, and so on. A third way to increase appetite is to lower your water intake. Obviously, you still need to take water in, but if you can get the minimum amount of water your body needs and not go above that amount, you will have an easier time keeping your hunger levels up. The reason we want to minimize water intake is simply because water is 0 calories and fills your stomach up. It is still incredibly important for the normal functioning of everything in your body, so you still need to get in enough, but try to not go too much above that amount. Number 4, you want to try to avoid any form of stimulant. Things like caffeine will have 2 different unwanted effects when you're trying to bulk up. First, it will affect your appetite. Caffeine is known to be an appetite suppressor. It is said that the caffeine in coffee can help reduce appetite, delay stomach emptying, and influence appetite hormones, all of which will reduce your appetite, which is something we want to avoid. Second, caffeine raises your metabolism, which makes you burn more calories. Since caffeine tends to wake you up and make you more alert, you'll naturally move slightly more throughout the time that caffeine is active in your system, and therefore increase your NEAT or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Your NEAT is all activity you perform throughout the day that isn't considered as exercise. For example, painting the fence, typing on a keyboard, taking the stairs, and so on. With caffeine, the amount of calories you burn through NEAT increases slightly. Fifth is to eat with a specific timer. When you're eating slowly because you're distracting yourself with any form of media, your body has time to realize it's full and you'll be able to eat less food overall. When you set a specific timer and you focus on getting the food down, your body won't realize the amount of food you ate and you'll therefore be able to eat more. Now, the last way to increase appetite is by walking. Walking helps with tons of things in your body, and one of those things is digestion. Now sure, walking burns a little bit of calories, but we have to look at both sides. On one side, we burn a few calories, which we want to avoid. On the other hand, we increase our appetite, which means we'll be able to consume more calories. In the end, the amount of calories we'll be able to consume from that increased appetite will far surpass the amount of calories we burned through the time we walked. So, now that we've covered, I believe, almost every way to increase your appetite and increase the amount of calories we consume, we still need to cover specific macronutrient intake during a bulk. Within macronutrients, our main focus will be on protein, which is then followed by fats. Now, the ideal amount of protein you need to take in will depend on the phase you're in. When you're bulking, you will need a different amount than if you're cutting. So, how much protein do you need when you're bulking? Like I said before, when you're bulking, your body is well fed and is much less likely to break down muscle tissue as a fuel source. You've got many carbs and fats as a source of energy to burn first. So, during a bulking phase, you often need less protein. To many people, that sounds counterintuitive because they have this idea that in order to put on lots of weight and muscle mass, you would need more protein, but that is not true. The ideal amount ranges from 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight, or 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. So, if you're a 150-pound person, you would need approximately 105 to 150 grams of protein per day. In terms of fat, we still need those for general function and hormone production. So for these, try and get at least 50 grams a day just to keep your body functioning properly. Now, once you have enough protein and fats, the rest of your calories can come from any source you want. But ideally, have them from fats since they have the lowest thermic effect and they're the highest in calories. And avoid having the rest of your calories from protein because they have the highest thermic effect and they have that filling effect as well. Now, before in this video, I was explaining a story about a friend of mine who thought he was eating so much food, but then when he explained to me what he was eating, I wasn't surprised he wasn't gaining any weight. One of the biggest mistakes guys trying to put on weight make is tracking their caloric intake in the wrong way and completely underestimating how much they're actually eating. Many guys wonder why they can't gain weight, but when you look at their diet, it's kind of obvious why they're not gaining any weight. So how I would go about tracking calories is by measuring everything you consume in the beginning with an app like MyFitnessPal, for example, to give you an estimated amount of calories you consume on a daily basis and turn tracking calories into a habit. You want to keep this going until you have the ability to approximately guess how many calories are in different foods. A few years ago for the month, I tracked all my meals meticulously, wrote down the calories per meal, macros per meal, and measured my total intake at the end of each day. That might seem obsessive, but I became really good at estimating how many calories were in different foods. I wasn't 100% exact, but I could guess with a good level of accuracy how many calories a certain meal contained. This way you'll always know with decent accuracy whether you're hitting your caloric intake for the day and whether you are consistently hitting that target every single day. I understand that tracking calories can seem like a hassle, but I truly think that it is of vital importance that you at least track a couple days to give you an idea of how many calories you're actually consuming and maybe finally make you realize you were underestimating how many calories you consumed every single day. Maybe those couple days will make you realize what was wrong this whole time and why you couldn't seem to gain weight. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something. You can watch this video on the best way to use protein to build muscle if you really want to take your bulk seriously.